Visit No One Likes Us Clothing for all your Millwall clobber. www.noonelikesus.co.uk.
Hi, I'm Gary Rowett, and you're listening to the world famous Achtung Millwall.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Achtung Millwall, the return of one of our listed Lions guests. I haven't done this for ages, absolute ages. And thanks to Alex Lee on Twitter, I had a little conversation, and I'm really, really pleased to welcome our first listed Lions for a very, very long time, too long. It's his dad, Steve Lee. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you, Nick. It's very kind, and it's good to be here.
Yeah, no, nice to have you, mate. Now, we were just talking off air, listeners, so we might as well get this bit out of the way. This is the less pleasant part of the show. I'm hoping. Steve, you're one of the intrepid 400 that made their way up to Blackburn on Saturday, mate.
Yeah,
a pretty dire performance. I'm just looking actually at a strange interview. Really, I find these interviews strange with Gary Rowett. I didn't see the game live. I've only gone by the reports and conversations since. But there's a certain kind of, we're just saying off air, there's almost a certain kind of taking people for granted. 400 people have made an effort to get to a far-flung northern place, and then they're treated to a series of what he describes as individual errors. Did you see our performance as individual errors, or was it something more deeper, formation-based problems?
I think to call it a performance would be sort of overstating the fact. Because there were individuals that were certainly full of endeavour, and I include the young fullback Shackleton, or the wingback Shackleton in there, who was really trying, and he had a lot of endeavour, and that was lacking in some of the more senior players, shall we say. We know Cresswell's a rookie, and we miss Sean Hutchinson dearly at the back for his organisational abilities.
We do.
But Cresswell is, as I say, a young player. He's got plenty of talent and plenty of promise, but he's playing at a level that's really testing it, and they try to capitalise on that potential area. You see. Otherwise, it was all puff and bluster in the first half. Blackburn didn't offer a great deal, apart from, as I was explaining earlier, a comical jump by the Brereton Diaz in the penalty box, which brought a lot of laughter from the fans. But that was about the best moment of the first half. And to be honest with you, I felt Blackburn were there to be taken, because they didn't look a particularly good side. But they came out the second half with desire, ambition that we didn't have. And
well, this is it.
They took the game by the scruff of the neck. Yeah,
I mean, this is what's striking me, that we haven't seen nearly 6 defeats now, Steve. Across what is it now, the 11 games of the season so far. So that's the bulk of our games that we're losing, and losing without any spirit. It strikes me. I mean, it's probably a good way to put it, because we just seem to look so fragile in defence. No one's taking responsibility. Gary Rowett, in this interview, it's on London News Online, mentions individual errors and people not being accountable. All of these stock football phrases that we get to hear. I mean, I was also struck by Adam Barrett on News at 10. He's talking about Tyler Bury, our one creative outlet, who, when he does come into a game, Steve, seems to have the ability to take the ball, run and create. And he's almost being dug at by Adam Barrett by saying that he's not consistent enough. Well, A, he's hardly starting, and B, when he does come in, he is consistent because he creates chances. Yeah. Do you agree that it's a management problem? Is it motivational from your perspective?
It certainly seems so in the second half, because, as I say, they didn't come out of the dressing room with any sort of ambition, any sort of game plan that was going to change the circumstances to take a real grip of the game. By contrast, Blackburn did, and they opened us up. They found space, and I know their goals were probably a couple of errors. We're obviously at the away end, so it was difficult to see from a distance. But I've seen the replay since, and Cresswell and Long got tangled up in each other and created a chance. And sadly, Afobe flicked on the header at the near post for their second goal. And we all know if you're defending that near post from a corner, you don't flick it back, you head it out. And these are basics. And Afobe's not a rookie; he's an experienced player now, and he should take responsibility there. I'm afraid. But overall, his performance was pretty lackluster.
Yes,
and so were so many others.
So much of the season has been lackluster. I think it's very difficult. We've said already. I'll say it again. Hats off to the 400 fans that made it to Blackburn on a very difficult day. I do find some of the pat answers that you read in these post-match press conferences, there's almost an undercurrent of taking people for granted. I mean, people have made a real effort. You've made a real effort, Steve, to get there. Loads of others have made efforts to get there, and to be treated to. I mean, we're Millwall fans, so we'll come on to our club over the last few years. So we're not expecting Ronaldo and Pep Guardiola football, are we? But you do expect some spirit, some drive, and I don't know what. There's some energy, some fire in the belly, and we're not seeing that for me this season.
If I pick up on your point about Tyler Bury, when we got in the ground fairly early, so you see the players going through their warm-up drills, etc.
Yeah,
Tyler looked a bit of a lonely character, and I hope that doesn't really show up in, if you like, the rest of the team's spirit. But he seemed a loner, whereas a lot of the others are in pairs or in small groups and so on. Okay, I know he's one of the subs, so he's a bit part player at the start of the gig, but he's got to play a part at some stage. And when he did come on, he started to open the game up a bit, to the extent where Blackburn put 3 defenders on him at certain times because they knew of his threat. Wow.
Yeah.
And Malone was trying to do overlaps with him, and they were trying to get a combination. This is not that there's no understanding like you used to see from Eiffel and Matt Lawrence and days gone by like that.
Yeah.
But there is something in Tyler Bury. And like there's something in Fleming. Fleming is a good player in the making.
He's a very good player. I make you right. Both players are talented, and we don't exploit them.
We've got to find a way of incorporating both those players. So the rest of the side needs to be set up to incorporate those players. We're over. We're in the post-Jed days now. The side was set up to get Jed the ball previously. He's not there anymore. So we've now got to set the team up in terms of, coming back to answer your question of management of formations, to get the best out of your assets that are going to win your games. You don't win games just by defending. You've got to score goals.
Well, this is it's a repeat theme. We've said it a few times on the shows over the course of this season, but it does seem to be Rowett's signature dish, so to speak, if you're a master chef, that you defend and you try to nick the game rather than imposing ourselves on the game. Now, I'll make the point again, listeners, that we're not playing with huge resources, so we're not on Manchester City able to bring in the very best and impose our pattern on the other side. So there's always going to be a battle, but this sitting back, waiting for the opportunity, hitting people on the break. It's not working this season, Steve. That's for sure, is it?
No, we've been found out there, and other sides, recognise that was our previous well-rehearsed tactic. They're prepared for that now. We've got to do something different, and I'm happy with the close season signings, and particularly the latest signing of Styles. These players like Honeyman and Styles are footballers. Yeah. They're not the players that we've seen sort of come into the side and just kick bottle and bite, as it were.
Yeah.
They've got some silky skills, but we've got to make sure we get the best out of that to get the creative element going, to get the best out of our forwards. And one thing's for certain, when I look at other sides and how they get these midfield players working well, they often have a player up front who can hold the ball up. We haven't.
We don't have that. No,
don't have that. So that might be the other ingredient that he's got to find to sort of get all the other components working satisfactorily. It's like an orchestra. If you've got an orchestra and you've got a conductor, he's directing all the different sections of the orchestra. But if there's a lot of brass required and you've got no trumpets or French horns, it ain't going to work. So we haven't got the complete balance yet, right? And that's what's needed.
I did. I mean, we haven't really seen enough of him in his preferred position. I did wonder whether that was Vogelsammer's place to be the striker where ball sticks. I haven't really seen that so far, and I wonder whether that is actually he's going to be his forte. But I wonder when he signed whether that was the intention behind it. But doesn't look that way at the moment, does it?
He looks a nervous player to me. Someone that's not comfortable yet, and whether that's because he lacks a bit of composure, which is unusual in a German player.
Yeah, change of environment, different country. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he hasn't settled in yet, but he looks a nervous player, whereas the others, the free spirits, the confident players play with confidence, and they're going to make a few mistakes here and there. Jed did, I've got to hold your hand up. Jed will often lose the ball in the wrong area of the pitch. But there are plenty of times where he was dangerous in the right areas, and that's what we've got to recreate.
I think that's an interesting point. I've often thought that. I mean, Jed matured over the years that he was with us. He came to us in 2016, 17, or something like that, I think. And it takes you a while to build a depth of confidence in your own ability. I mean, this goes in life generally, Steve, doesn't it? Yep. But the ability to be prepared to take a risk and make a mistake and listen to the torrent of what you're going to hear when you give the ball away, it's hard for a youngster. I'm thinking of maybe someone like a Fleming or even a Bury. They both seem to have plenty of confidence. So let's hope that continues. But I think sometimes you kind of develop into that role, but we don't have anyone at the moment that, we're not playing anyone. Fleming is starting, but certainly Bury is not starting. That seems to be trusted by manager. I think that must seep through into a player's confidence at some point.
That's a good point. It is a good point. And I think your earlier comment about what Adam Barrett's saying about Bury is not going to help his confidence and not going to, if you like, inspire him. And again, it comes back to the management. The management have to get into these players, get into their minds and get into their psyches and give them confidence, show their confidence in their abilities and direct them into the areas of the game that's going to be beneficial to Millwall's game plan. But don't see it. It's a bit of a mishmash still.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Unfair, but that's why people listen to our show, Steve. Unfair. Are you a Rowett man? Are you for keeping him? Would you give him a period of time, or are you for calling it quits? Where do you stand on the big question? It's probably the only question really that dominates Millwall fans' thoughts at the moment.
It's one I tangle with. And I noticed that Middlesbrough have sacked Wilder today.
They have just before we started talking.
And he's a promotion specialist, so no one's infallible in these situations. No. I go back to, in some respects, the Kenny Jackett situation. Who are we going to get any better? And if Rowett goes, we'll never get relegated with Rowett. I think that he'll find some way of just stabilising.
He gets results when he needs them. I think. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
But if we're going to make as the chairman and the owner has made the investment he has, his expectations must be greater. Now, if Rowett can't deliver those expectations, then you've got to find someone who can.
Agree.
So I still think he should be given some time, and I think sometimes it's about gelling these players and incorporating them into a side that's going to work for you. There aren't enough signs for it working yet. It's got to happen soon, otherwise, yes, he's probably on borrowed time.
Well, results start to take care of matters. If whatever you and I might think about the rights and wrongs of it, we've got this natural break of a World Cup, most unusual season in that way, but we have it whether we like it or not in November. That seems to me to be a natural point where you might take a step back and review matters. It also gives time for clubs, if they do want to lose a manager, to find someone new without competitive football for 4 weeks, I think it is, isn't it? 3 weeks maybe in our case. So I think we've probably got Rowett until the World Cup, but results are going to govern what happens from there. and it's been a moderate start. I wouldn't say it's been a poor start to the season, but it's been a very, very moderate start, which wasn't what the investment was intended to achieve, was it? Let's move along. I brought you on as a listed lion guest, and as I said at the start of the show, I haven't done this for a long time. It's really nice to be able to do it again. This is where we fire 10 standard questions at our guest to try and find out a little bit more about themselves and their Millwall experience over the years. Now, we already know your name, so Steve Lee, so I won't dwell on that. What was your first Millwall game, Steve? Where did you first start going?
It was on my 10th birthday in April 1966.
Wow. Okay.
It was home game against Bournemouth, and we won 1-0, Len Julian scoring.
Right.
At the time, our family home was in Brixton. I was sort of born in the Stockwell-Kennington area and brought up mostly in the Brixton area before moving to East Dulwich in sort of 67 when I went on to senior school.
Right.
The Bournemouth game, where we lived in Brixton, there used to be a station on the Victoria line that ran through to Queens Road, Peckham, a station called East Brixton, which was in the sort of bottom of Cold Harbour Lane. That was the connection or the route from Camberwell to Brixton. So my dad and I got the train, and I can remember walking the back doubles through from Queens Road, Peckham round to Ilton Road, and up Hornshay Street and into the ground. And in that first game, my dad and I sat in the main stand. He sat.
Really, posh, yeah.
Big birthday present. As he said, he never went in the stand, but he took me there.
Your dad was a Millwall fan already, Steve. He was a Millwall.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, my dad was brought up in Brixton. He went to school with Pat Terry.
Okay, yeah, ex-Millwall player. Yeah,
absolutely. So he had quite a few stories about his youth and time with Pat Terry as a kid. But he's the family from his generation really have all been Mill supporters. His uncle was a Millwall fan, Timmy Cahill, who was a well-known character in the Warth Road. He went Millwall all the reserve games, let alone the home games.
I always love that phrase. He's a well-known character. There's a lot in that. There's a lot in that word. Yeah. One thing we're not short of as a club, we might be short of money over the years. We're not short of characters, are we? No, it's always been something that struck me from the very first time I started. So 1966. Yeah. So that would have been round about the time of the unbeaten run when it was
during the 59 home game. Yeah.
Did you see the final, the defeat that finally put?
Sadly I missed that. There was a family do because we had family sort of in various parts of the southeast.
Yeah.
And I used to go quite regularly with my cousin by then, my cousin Paul. So we went to many, or almost all the home games. Very few away games. We didn't have the pocket money.
No, that was one of the things that always, it's hard to get across to youngsters now. It's just different times. You didn't really go away. We didn't have the money. I don't know about yourself, but it just wasn't such a big thing back then. I mean, people did do it, but I certainly wasn't until older started doing away games. You got the Millwall bug early then. What was your memory of that game? Can you remember much about it?
I just remember the crowd being the biggest thing I'd ever seen in terms of numbers of people in one place. And I think it was about 17,000. So it was quite significant. But of course, the old den then, the main stand, the forecourt was a standing area. It didn't have seats, didn't have those seats.
Okay, that predates me. Yeah.
So people stood in there as well as the other parts are standing in the ground. But when I went with my dad subsequently, we used to stand in the corner that was what he called the bomb crater corner, which was sort of backed into where
I've seen the pictures.
Where the New Cross Stadium was. So that was our traditional standing point.
Right.
Over there. So I the other thing I suppose about the game, I obviously as a young kid, the players looked so tall and big built,
huge,
enormous, and of course some of them had beer bellies. There's that famous picture in Harry's bar of Dennis Burnett looking very lithe and slim, and Harry having looked as though he's just had a few pints.
Just come out of the pub. That's right. Yeah. Well, these were different times. Players and fans did mix in that way, didn't they? I mean, they would, it was well known the players would have a few drinks in the pubs along the old Kent Road that populated the area, and it was just a different time. Just found your fixture here. It's Bournemouth 1, Millwall 1, Bournemouth 0. April 1966. There was a crowd of 17,500. A Len Julian's goal in the 6th minute. Wonderful times. And this was a promotion season, actually.
Promotion, yeah. I think they got second. And
second, we finished there, Steve.
Yeah, Division 3.
Third division, so we go up to the second division. With dreams of the top flight.
Achtung, Millwall.
So the second question: where did you when you started going regularly? Were you always a seats man at the Coldblow Lane?
No.
Stand?
My cousin and I stood on the opposite corner. If you're going from the halfway line towards Coldblow Lane, there used to be a set of steps under the white police box.
Yes, there
were.
Yeah,
quite steep steps that had a great better for standing to get better of a view. So my cousin and I used to stand there quite regularly.
Okay. I never watched football there. That's weird, actually, because I always used to look at it, and I never went there. I always was on the halfway line for the most part, but I never went to that bit. And they finished up putting seats there in the first division days. They turned it into like a family area. Didn't they?
That's right.
Seats around there.
But latterly at the old den, I stood probably just to the again the corner of where the bomb crater was and the halfway line, around that sort of area. And by then I was going with my father-in-law even, so just before the move to the new ground.
It's a cliche to say it, but there was nowhere else. I've never really been to another ground quite like it. I mean, there were many grounds at that time had terracing all the way around. I've been to Charlton back in the 70s, maybe yourself too, Steve. But there was nowhere that, I think it was that word that we said already, character. There was just nowhere that brought this torrent of characters. It was just full of. The place as a kid seemed to be full of people that I'd never seen before. It's like something out of a Charles Dickens novel.
Sure.
Weird and wonderful people all around you where you went in the ground. There's nothing quite like it. I've never seen any other ground that matched it on that front. One
of them being the Peanut Lady, who used to circulate the stands selling her bags of.
I came across her later in life, the Peanut Lady, because she was always a regular face at the den, the old den. Selling her peanuts, as you say, inside the ground and also on the outside, great bag of shelled peanuts. And I used to I was in housing management. I worked for Greenwich Council. One day I went into a flat on the Ferrier estate in Kidbrooke, and there she was. It was the Peanut Lady. She lived on the Ferrier estate. It was a very odd experience because you feel like you know these people. I didn't know her at all. I've never spoken to her, but you feel like you know them because they're familiar faces. But yeah, so Coldblow Lane. 30 years since we left it, Steve. It's so sometimes it doesn't seem like, it just seems like yesterday to me. That I can still picture the ground in my mind. It left me with a big impression. It must have done you too.
Very much so. It was. I've got some fond memories of some great games there. Got some very difficult memories of some heavy defeats because we had some yo-yo times there. I mean, the Benny Fenton days were probably the ones, because I was a schoolboy and a youngster, and really looking up to these athletes, but Benny Fenton really put a side together of some really good players. When he signed Posse and Weller. And the likes of Dennis Burnett and people like that, he Gordon Bolland. There were some good signings, and he managed to get that working with some existing players like Eamon Dunphy, and obviously with Gilchrist and Cripps, and one of the best signings was replacing Alex Stepney, which was always going to be difficult. Bringing in Laurie Leslie, it was a terrific keeper.
Yeah, and then Brian King also.
King, you're
right. I mean, Laurie Leslie. When I started going, Laurie Leslie was the coach. So I never saw Laurie Leslie play, but I mean, he was a Scottish international goalkeeper. He was a very decent goalkeeper in his day. I think you're right. I mean, Benny Fenton is one of those underrated managers. I suppose it's a long time ago now that. So memories fade of how good a manager he was. He was a pragmatic manager. He produced a team that was very difficult to beat, and took us within a hair's breadth of promotion, Steve.
Very
Were you
much
there?
so.
Were you there that day that we thought we got promoted?
Yes.
72.
It still gives me the shivers, actually.
Yeah, me too,
thinking
actually.
about that. But your expectations are, again, that was the days where you were relying on someone who might have had a little mobile radio.
Yes, that's right.
It's amazing how communicating was so.
It was rudimentary, wasn't it? It was someone would bring along often quite a hefty lump of wood. The radio is like a thing with batteries, like real old school batteries inside, and upon that you relied on them for information because there was nothing like the ease and flow that we have now. I sometimes think we've gone too far in the opposite direction because it's almost 24/7 now, Steve. Football back then was a weekly experience, maybe a fortnightly experience, weekly if you went to other clubs. But now it's round the clock, isn't it? I'm not sure we've gained much in some ways.
Just going back to Benny Fenton a second. My dad saw him play.
Did he?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. And he said a very cultured player, a very good player. So he came with a reputation where I suppose he could say to other players, "I've been there, I've done it." And so I think there was a lot of respect for him. But they were a good footballing side as well. That's what I liked about them. They moved the ball quickly, and again, he got the component parts right. He had Billy Neal on the left wing for a couple of seasons, and when he needed to replace players, he got like for like players in.
Absolutely,
and that was so important because he knew what the strengths of the side were, and we were very, very good defensively.
absolutely.
To get a young Kitchener to come into the side to replace Brian Snowden was a big plus, we got good replacements in, so that the continuity and the run he had, Benny Fenton I'm sure he would have looked back on it as being very proud of what he achieved.
He was a great finder of talent. We've mentioned, the likes of Brian King, Kitch. My mind always goes back to Gordon Hill. I mean, he was a tremendous player quite early in his career because he would go on to Manchester United in England. But when you think about the players, Posse, Bolland, you've mentioned, but even someone like Burnett was a very cultured defender, really. He was very elegant on the ball, it seemed to me, as a youngster.
Yeah.
But that summed up Benny. It's just interesting to think of him because one of the things I always remember reading that I was a bit strangely impressed by this was there was a description. It's like one of these shoot things where they ask you great influence on your career and what do you like to do outside the game? And Benny's reply with this profile was he enjoyed a nice glass of red wine and a good crossword. I thought, what's a good crossword? Because the only ones I saw were the Sun had like an easy one, had a cryptic and an easy and a simple version. I thought, I don't know if that qualifies as a good crossword, and we didn't have wine in the house, so I thought that sounded really bohemian, like someone like to enjoy a good crossword and a glass of red wine.
Sure,
summed him up as a man. I think a great manager. We moved out of Coldblow Lane, Steve, in 1993, 30 years ago now, strange as it sounds.
Yeah.
Do you remember what did you make of the new Den when you first saw it? Do you like the new Den? Do you enjoy it as a stadium? I still call it Den.
Den. Well, I think back to the time when there was some thought about redeveloping the old ground. And if I remember rightly, it was something to do with pipe work that was underneath the ground that was going to be so difficult to alter and to change to get the foundations for big stands. But of course, Senegal Fields became available, and one of my brother-in-laws sort of grew up in that area when he was a youngster.
Okay.
So he said, "No, it's just down the road. A lot of other clubs have had to move a larger distance,
further afield." Yeah.
So it was time, and the club needed to come into. If it had the ambition still, it needed to come into the 20th century with something that was going to be A, marketable, and B, offer the facilities to bring a wider audience in. Because some of our audience was disappearing. Let's be fair.
Yeah, well, that's continued, isn't it? It's that's part of the existential question of Millwall. We're still talking about that now, really, because there's always this hint that we might be moving or relocating, further afield, trying to find the fan base. So that question was there then. You're right. I mean, I think the problem with Coldblow Lane was always that I think the Taylor report required vehicle access all the way round the stadium, and Coldblow Lane was squeezed into a very difficult triangular site, wasn't it?
Absolutely right.
And I don't think it lent itself to the Taylor report, because the side seatings used to back onto people's back gardens. I think I can't remember the name of the road now. Brocklehurst, I think. But anyway, there was one of the roads along there, and then the kind of the main halfway line, as we call it, was essentially a kind of a mound, wasn't it? It's like it curved up and curved down again into Bomb Crater Corner. So I don't think the site lent itself. It felt like a tremendous wrench when we moved. I do remember that. But I also remember, Steve, don't know what your impressions of the new ground were when you first got there, but I remember being absolutely blown away by what we'd achieved by building this brand new stadium. You just didn't see brand new stadiums back in those times.
No, the facilities were such a step up. They were a giant leap from what we had previously had, and I think mostly our fans have respected it. And I think it's a situation where certainly when we were going there at that particular time after the move, I was going to the East Lower in what was the junior line section, because by then my son was coming, and a couple of years later my daughter Catherine would come along, and by then we lived in West Berkshire, so we were travelling a couple of hours into town for home games.
Wow.
And so it was a bit of a commitment. It was always quite handy because my in-laws lived in the sort of initially Lewisham area, but then the sort of Bexley Heath area. So I would drop my wife off to see her parents and her sisters, etc. And my father-in-law would jump in the car with me and the kids, and then we'd go to
football.
Exactly. But it made for long days. We'd be setting out 10 o'clock.
I was going to say, that's a full day out.
8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
But the kids bought into it, and it was good. Great fun.
We've mentioned commitment already for those that went to Blackburn, including yourself, and there's an example of it. I don't know that it's always absorbed by those in the game, how much commitment fans do put in. Who's your favourite all-time player, Steve? Who would you choose?
There's only one player for me. It's Keith Weller.
Keith Weller.
Keith Weller was the 3 seasons he played for us, and I just looked at him on Wikipedia earlier on. And his stats were 40 goals in 121 games over 3 seasons, which is pretty decent. But the beauty of him as a footballer, he was the player that as a young kid I wanted to be, playing on Peckham Rye.
Right.
Everyone chose their player that they wanted to be, and mine was Keith Weller, and in his number 8 shirt. But I just found him. He could play on the wing. He could play centre forward. He could play inside forward. He could play a wing half, because there was that slow change after Ramsey's 4-3-3 1966. From the traditional wing backs and inside forwards. Side started to have this new tactical setup. 4-3-3. That was the overriding tactical formation then. But Weller could play anywhere in that front 6. And he was just a gifted footballer. He
left us in May 1970. He was brought from Tottenham in June 67, £17,000. This is an example of different times in the game. 17,000 sold to Chelsea.
Posse, of course. It was
there was part of the double
together.
Yeah, that was a signing. What a double signing there, Steve. Wow, Posse and Weller. And then we sold him to Chelsea in May 1970 for 100,000. He would go on to play for Leicester City
and
England, and eventually he went to America. I think he was playing in the NASL in the end. But those that have seen him, it was before my time. Listeners speak only well of Keith Weller. All right, well, we've had the best player you've ever seen.
Well,
what's the diametric opposite of best, Steve? What's the worst you've ever seen?
There's a long list of them. Let's be fair.
It's hard to pick one. I think I always think every time I say this is an unfair question, really, because it's not always nice to pick out one particular player. So, there we are. This is what makes for entertaining listening, isn't it? We've had a few.
If you'll allow me, I'm going to have 2.
Go on. Yeah.
The first was Jim Standen, who was a goalkeeper. an ex-West Ham goalkeeper that Fenton had to sign as a fill-in. I remember looking back on it, and I worked with a chap. It was a good friend of mine who's no longer with us, sadly. But he was a West Ham fan. Whose the rest of his family were all Millwall.
Right.
And we used to laugh and joke about Jim Standen, and he said, he was in the West Ham Cup Winners' Cup team and all that. He never played in a winning Millwall team in the years, the 2 or 3 years he was with. He was a deputising goalkeeper for Brian King at the time.
Brian King, just 8 appearances for him. I just found him 8 appearances.
He was appalling, absolutely appalling. But equally appalling was that this kid that Jimmy Nichol brought down from Rafe Rovers called
Davey Sinclair. Yeah.
Oh,
the tattooed man with the tattooed teeth.
Oh,
he was going to be so hard.
Absolutely. He was Hurlock and Cripps combined. He was nothing like them. That's a shame on using those sort of descriptions. He was a terrible player. He shouldn't have been a professional footballer, but he was a pub footballer basically, and he would have made some Sunday football teams probably.
We signed him from Rafe Rovers. Rafe Rovers in 1996. A joint fee. Can you believe this? A joint fee. I don't know who'd come with. It was Crawford. The joint fee was £1 million. He was part of a deal involving £1 million. Can you believe that? Partly anyway. And he was sold to Dundee for 90,000 in 1997. But no, you're right. He was an appalling player. I can't speak badly of Jim Standen because I didn't see him, so I'll pass on. But I did see Davey Sinclair with the tattooed teeth. Tough time. Jimmy Nichol was a tough time. I mean, I do find doing these kinds of shows, Steve, that you find yourself moaning about situations where you think, hang on, where have we been in the past? Peter Anderson, Jimmy Nichol.
Yeah.
Some dark days. You're not really in a position to moan, but there we are.
Well, there's an interesting story in that period of Jimmy Nichol's reign. We lost to Woking in the cup after
we did.
A replay, remember? Now, Woking's star player was one Clive Walker.
Yeah, over the hill, Clive Walker as well.
I have to be careful what I say here, but an old friend of mine did the programme for Woking, and he had difficulty with the little pen pictures of the players.
Yeah.
Because Clive Walker had a gap in his career. Shall I say no more?
I'll just put that down as otherwise engaged or something. I don't know. Move along. Yeah, move along. Your most memorable match. I'm tight in with. I've got favourite Millwall moment, most memorable match. I mean, they'd probably come as similar things. What would you choose as your biggest memory, favourite memory?
Most memorable match was the Chelsea FA Cup tie in '95.
Okay.
When Keller saved the penalty
at Stamford Bridge. Yeah.
That the tension and the atmosphere in that ground that night was something to behold. And there's been some similar situations when we've played West Ham and games. Yeah. But that night at Stamford Bridge, even going to the game, the atmosphere outside the ground was electric,
crackling.
Inside the ground, it was super. I went with my father-in-law Len and my brother-in-law Des, and we were about to leave the ground having won. Yeah. And the chap on the gate said, "I can't let you out." He said, "It's mayhem out there.
Kick it off."
So I said, "Look, my father-in-law here," and he put on the old, "I've got angina act," So and he could do it so well. Then. So the guy said, "Look, I'll let you sneak through." So the three of us sneak through this open gate, which he quickly locked behind us, and we're walking out down Fulham Road, and I went to school in Streatham, so I had a lot of mates who were Chelsea fans. And because I got spotted in Fulham Road by one of my old schoolmates, and because he shouts out, "What are you doing here?" Completely make sure everybody around knows that there's a couple of Millwall fans available. But no, it was a fantastic night, and Alex Ray that night was superb.
Superb player. I was thinking about Alex Ray the other day. One of my favourite. I mean, you have to pick one when you do these things, but Alex Ray is one of my choices for a fantastic, great player. And then you're right, that was his night, wasn't it? He lived for situations like that, didn't he?
Did,
but yeah, great choice. That was part of the cup run. We went to Arsenal. I think Arsenal was after Chelsea, wasn't it? We beat Chelsea on penalties. And
I think it was QPR
was it before?
after Chelsea.
Oh, was it QPR? Yeah, because Arsenal had been the start of the run there, and then Chelsea and QPR.
Yeah.
Because I was at Highbury for that one. That was a great night as well. The Mark Kennedy goal that buried Chelsea for Arsenal for good that night. Yeah. Wonderful times. Who's your favourite current player, Steve?
I'll just go back to the favourite moment matches, because no one can discount the moment we all had at Cardiff. Because that day out, and all right, it's been coined in many other areas as a Jolly Boys outing, which it was terrific, and we got beaten by when you look at the lineup, Man United,
very good side, international class side,
with a young Ronaldo as well.
Yeah,
it was a
Beckham,
sight to behold.
yeah.
But we was a big family group. My dad was there when he and Uncle Ted who used to come to games with us. We just had a wonderful day out that we'll never forget. And from the moment we left to set off for the game till we got back, and then got back to the pub where we had jellied eels lined up and a few pints. And it was a day to behold.
It was a wonder because the cup final was, a day out, as you rightly say. It didn't really have the tension, the gnawing sense of impending doom that the semi-final had. I mean, that was the longest half of football I think I've ever experienced. I can't think of anything that came close to it, that second half.
Well, I've always said that cup final for us really hung on the fact that when Dickie-O got sent off at Notts Forest, and it was a young Wes Morgan who wound him up, and Dickie-O should have known better. Yeah, and I'd been through work. I got some seats behind the dugouts, the Millwall dugout at Forest, and I could see Wilkins' face when the referee went over to him, and he turned round to the bench and he was just shaking his head because he knew what was going to happen, and because he knew then Dickie-O was out of the final.
Yeah. And naive of him, but there
absolutely. And he wasn't. Dickie-O wasn't a kid. Morgan was. But Dickie-O got brought into a little ruck that he should have had nothing to do with, and just concentrated on the rest of the game. And we left that night, and I said to the guy I travelled up with, I said, that's cost us any chance we might have had in the final.
Yeah. Great day, great yes. Run. These are the moments that live in your life.
Achtung, Millwall.
So who would you pick out as your favourite current player? It's quite difficult at the moment, really, because I haven't really had a great season to pick many out. Who do you like in the current side?
My favourite player is Sean Hutchinson, has been for a couple of seasons, because, as I said at the beginning, the side are so reliant upon his leadership and organisational skills, and he reads the game so well. So and to be fair, we've had some injury timeouts with him, and particularly when he started with the club, he missed quite a few games when he was first at Fulham.
We've certainly missed him this season, Steve. That's for sure,
without question. And as I say, he's an intelligent player, and the side are much weaker without him. And it's, I like his style, and I like the way he plays the game. And
nice choice. Again, nice choice.
He's. I know he's from the northeast, but for me, he's a Millwall player. He cares.
Yeah. No, I agree. He's been here, but like Jake, they've been alongside each other for a few years now, and they're both Millwall players. I think we do miss Hutchinson's organisation. That's been apparent over the course of this fragile season so far. Good choice, Sean Hutchinson. I never like the word. I've written the most hated opponent. I never like the word hate really in football, to be honest. I know people say it's a Millwall show. There'll be people turning off left, right, and centre. But who's your most disliked opponent, team or play? You can have a choice of.
Well, it's Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace.
Because at school, because at school I went to school with a lot of Palace fans. There was
Yeah.
a lot of bitter rivalry during that period, and we played each other quite often during that period.
Yeah.
Often with good results. We came out on top on some good occasions. But they had a right winger called Mark Lazarus.
Remember the name? Yeah.
He I think they got him from Orient, and he was a thorn in our side, and certainly a thorn in Harry Cripp's side. And they beat us at a Christmas game. It might have been Boxing Day, or certainly a game over the Christmas holiday, where they beat us 2-0 at the Den, and Lazarus scored. Keith Weller actually missed a penalty, if I remember correctly. And like the stick I got at school when I went back with Lazarus, and oh crikey! So Crystal Palace has always been my the side I dislike most.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I went to school with a load of Crystal Palace fans. I went to school in Bromley, and it was during the 70s. They were always rated as the team of the decade, weren't they? I don't know how they achieved this. They were the team of the 70s, and they became the team of the 80s, and I don't know they did away after that. But I was like, how do you achieve this tag of being the team of whatever decade you're in? But I think they've always had a certain kind of middle class niceness to them that belies the reality when you go there. So I'll go. I
still think they're the Glaziers rather than the Eagles, but there you go. That's another story.
Playing in claret and blue, that speaks volumes for them as well.
Yeah.
Okay, last question on my little list here, Steve. Name your best ever Millwall 11. So. This was they bounced this question on me when I did the Lions live show. I had no time to prep. I'm hoping I've given you a little bit of notice to have a think about your best ever Millwall 11.
Okay, Brian King.
Good choice. Great goalkeeper. Absolutely. Yeah.
He's a number of appearances. He's loyalty to the club, and he still comes back to the club now, and
he does
and does his bit for the executive club. I know, and. Yeah, he's a top man and was a fine goalkeeper. And sadly, he was in an era when England had a surfeit of some good goalkeepers. Otherwise, he'd have made quite a few international.
Great goalkeeper. And as you say, I'm up against the likes of Greg Clements, Gordon Banks to some level
Shilton.
As well. Shilton, yeah. So
Peter
and then there were many goalkeepers of their kind of second rank at many of the first division sides that could easily have stepped into I think of Joe Corrigan at Manchester City and all great goalkeepers, big boys. Let's go across the back line. Who's your defenders?
It's a back four.
Back four.
Yep. Ray Evans at right back.
Oh, that's a good choice. I do agree with that one because he's not often named, Ray Evans.
I like him.
I love that we beat Chelsea when he scored a free kick that day, which I can remember still in my head, and I've seen it on YouTube since. Wonderful player, though. Very cultured, but also hard. It was no one's fault, was he? Good choice.
He was one of the first what I saw as a real attacking fullback.
Yes, he was.
The other pretenses of attacking were, we might be going up for a corner or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he could get down the line and get back and defend. And in a similar vein, that's why my left back would always be indoors because I always thought, even though he was a right-footed left back.
Yes, he was.
He was a terrific footballer. And when Doherty signed him, I thought that was the missing link in the promotion side because we just needed that extra defender who knew the game and was no way out of his depth when we got into the old first division. He came
from QPR. I think we signed him when we were promoted. I think we were at the first division season. He just brought a touch of class, really quality to the back line. I do agree. Good is there. Are you going in the centre then, Steve?
It goes back to my Kitchener and Burnett days.
Great choices.
They were a partnership and complemented each other.
Yeah.
There was the fearless, intrepid Barry Kitchener with the cultured football of Dennis Burnett. That sort of combination was a gift for us. I look to those days with many fond memories of great performances from them both.
Wonderful. That's a fair defence. Ray Evans, Dennis Burnett, Barry Kitchener, and Ian Dawes. That's a defence that would go up against anyone. I think. Great choices there, mate. What about your midfield? Are you going for in midfield?
I'm 4 across the midfield. Although it there are different ways of doing it. I've probably lopsided it in some respects because I've got to pick Alex Ray, who I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. Wonderful, dynamic attacking midfielder. What we wouldn't give for him in this side now, Steve?
Absolutely.
In his pomp,
could hit a ball as hard as most other players.
Yeah,
and also when you talk about attacking midfielders, Timmy Cahill, who again was very, very loyal to us, and I think it was a situation where he could have gone a lot earlier in some respects, but he went on to have still a formidable career at Everton and as
internationally as well. Yeah, absolutely, World Cup footballer.
Timmy was a terrific servant to our club.
Alex Ray and Tim Cahill, great choices. Who you got on the wings?
Well, I'm going to put on the right side. The only way I can winkle him in really, and that's Terry Hurlock, who I think was underrated as a footballer.
Yes, he was. Great footballer.
He was. His footballing skills were unfortunately overlooked because of his
his demeanour. His demeanour.
But he actually could pass a ball. He could control the ball. He had a vision.
Yes, he did.
I'm not saying Les Briley wasn't up to that standard, but Les Briley knew Hurlock's strengths and made sure
he brought him into the game.
Absolutely. So I don't underestimate Les's contribution there. But I'm also going to have a bit of a maverick choice here in midfield because I'm going to choose Stephen Reid.
Okay, that's a good choice.
Because I know again, in many ways he probably wasn't at our club as long as he could have been. But again, he went on to have a fairly decent career,
coaching, and he's moved into kind of self-help zone now outside the game. Great striker of a free kick, really
wonderful. But he could play up and down the wing in a way that gave the balance because we had obviously Paul Ifill opposite him in that side that McGee had. But what I liked about Reedy, he could play anywhere. He could go fullback if you needed him to. He's quite a versatile player. A
product of our youth. That wonderful period where we produced or signed youngsters that got us out of the tier league Division 2, I think it was called back then. Great, that's a great midfield. So we've got Hurlock, we've got Stephen Reid, we've got Tim Cahill. Who's the other one? Alex Ray. Great midfield. Up front now, Steve. Who are we going to go for as your striker? Well, I love the way we've gone naturally into 4-4-2 here. This is because we're Millwall fans. We've gone straight to a 4-4-2 setup here.
I have to say Weller, a boyhood hero. And he was a good enough player to could have played in any era. He was technically that good. So I've said I think why I like him so much. But alongside him has to be Teddy Sheringham.
Tremendous player. Yeah,
because that season after we got relegated when he scored 38 goals or whatever. 38. Yes.
In all competitions in 1990, he scored 33 goals in all comps. I think it was probably about 29 league goals. And he didn't. What I admired about there, Steve, was that at the end of the first division period, other players moved on. I would have expected Teddy to have moved on. But he stuck around with us. He gets slated and slagged by those that never saw him and don't understand his contribution to the club. But that was some season. 33 goals in all competitions in one season. Incredible, isn't it?
Well, the hat trick he got at Bristol City was Alex's first away game.
Right.
And we came out of there and Alex was full of, what Teddy had done. I said, well, we can talk about it more in the car rather than walking around the streets to where we parked, because there were a lot of City fans on the lookout for
Millwall.
Which was often the case up at Ashton Gate.
Yes.
But Sheringham that day was he was untouchable. It's a magnificent performance as an individual performance that I've probably seen for Millwall. So that's my lineup. I've got one substitute that I want to throw in.
Yeah, please. I'm going to say any subs. Yeah.
I'm going to go in the old-fashioned way. One sub.
Just one sub. Old school.
This chap again could play everywhere. Lucas Neal.
Yes, very cultured player as well. Keep using that word, don't we? Yeah.
And Lucas Neal was the missing component for the game at the Old Wembley for the auto windscreens. He got injured against Peterborough the week before the final. Yeah. And we had no replacement for him. And he, against Wigan, he'd have won that game for us hands down because he was just a superb player.
He was very skillful with the ball, intelligent, you name it. Great choice.
Yeah.
That's a good substitute to have. Lucas Neal coming off the bench. And I like the old school one-man substitute. You don't get enough of that in the modern game, do we?
No.
There we are. Steve, we've reached the end of our listed line questions. I hope you enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's
a trip down cold-blown memory lane.
Very, very true. And to think about some of the people I went to football with over those years, bring back some really happy memories, and they were important to me as I got older, and as I am now a grandfather, and hoping to take my grandchildren at some stage in the near future. So that's an ambition still to have.
Well said. I like that. I really enjoy doing these little shows, listeners, listed lines. If you're interested in coming on, do get in touch with me. It's always great to talk to Millwall fans and reminisce about the old days, Coldblow Lane, and all the rest of it. I've really enjoyed doing this, Steve. So thank you very much for
You're very welcome.
Joining me today. We will be back later on in the week after what looks like a difficult trip to Rotherham, Steve, Wednesday night. And then what could well be a very tough home game versus Middlesbrough for Gary Rowett. But let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Those two. Give me a score prediction for Rotherham and
at best is a draw at Rotherham. The Middlesbrough game, them being managerless at the minute. Some sides react positively to being managerless, of course.
Rowett needs a win. He needs a win.
He does.
We'll see. Let's keep our fingers crossed for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve Lee, listed line. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, mate. You. And thank you to you two for tuning in. Till the next edition. Arrivederci Millwall. Bye for now.
Achtung, Millwall.